So it's the end of April, and I thought I'd share some of the books that we've been reading this month in April. Starting with the read alouds that we've been doing this month, we got through Prince Caspian. We thoroughly enjoyed this. Actually, a couple of chapters into this book, we switched over to the dramatized version just to give my voice a break between Bible study and history study, and then we do read alouds, and we do that whole chunk first thing in the morning. Sometimes it's nice to change it up a little bit with an audio version, so we didn't do Audible. We did the Focus on the Family dramatized series of Prince Caspian, and we really enjoyed it. For now, we are starting something completely different. I was actually ready for like a Henry Huggins or a Homer Price kind of style, Beverly Cleary, but maybe a bit better literary quality. So rather than going to something that we'd already read, I pulled this off the shelf, which is a secondhand copy of The Great Brain, which I remember my best friend as a kid loving this book. I've actually never had the chance to read it, so I thought, you know what, let's give it a try. I'm ready for something lighter and kind of funny, and I also like the time period that the story is set in, which is like not the Great Depression, but like nobody has a bathroom in their house yet. So the first chapter is actually their dad, who is known for ordering these inventions that can go either really awesome or he just becomes the laughing stock of the community. Their dad orders a toilet to be installed in their house. So, and their adventure around that. So I also really like that time period of a book. So we are reading this, and it will probably take us the whole month to get through. I didn't realize actually how long the chapters were, but it looks like each of the chapters are standalone stories, which is also really nice because it keeps things really fresh. Okay, starting with my youngest. So he read Mouse Tales, which is super cute. I love the little stories in this. It was so much fun to read these stories to my kids when they were little. They loved them. So I think the familiarity also keeps him engaged, and sometimes my kids just need to go to something comfortable. So do I. Then he read Beverly Cleary, Socks, and he got through this within 2 weeks. Then he read The Story of Balto. Now he is on Jake Drake, the Bully Buster. He likes Jake Drake, and he also likes Nate the Great. And then for my 4th grader daughter, she finished reading Sarah Witcher's story. So Elizabeth Yates is a celebrated author, I would say, in the Good and the Beautiful language arts curriculum. She wrote Mountain Born, which we haven't read in ages. I remember reading this to my oldest in grade 2 or 3, and it was such a nice little story. I should actually, pulling it out now, we should try and read this again one day. But she, anyways, quality author, old time author, like, yeah, born in 1905. So this Sarah Witcher story is a folktale from New Hampshire. And so my 4th grader daughter really enjoyed reading this. Now she is on Happy Days in a Noisy Village by Astrid Lindgren, which of course is the author of Pippi Longstocking. Again, a nice oldie but a goodie. I like the old books as far as middle grade novels go. They're really nice, and usually you can't go wrong. With my 5th grader son, he finished up, I can't remember if he was going through the Wright Brothers in March, but he finished this in April and seemed to enjoy it, and he always pulled out little facts. That was good for him. I also liked this because it was a biography. It's nonfiction, but it was easy reading. And then I challenged him a little bit with this, which was very difficult for him to get into just because of the name, Rickshaw Girl. Sadly, he saw that and he went, Rickshaw Girl, I don't want to read that. But I'm glad he kept onto it. It was difficult for him to get into just because the interest wasn't there right away. The way that I kept his interest on this when he wanted to quit was offering him harder biographies. So sometimes you just gotta offer something harder to get them to stick with the thing that they didn't really want to do in the first place. So after that, so I let him choose another book. He just chose this week, and it is called Silver Street Farm. This is not an old book. This is a fairly new book, 2013, and it's just a funny, easy read. So I'm happy to have him doing something easy after he did the Wright Brothers and the Rickshaw Girl. Now, for my 7th grader, it's not difficult at all to get her to dive into biographies. One of my goals for her this past year, has been that she read more nonfiction. So she has definitely done that, and read just a lot of books that she probably wouldn't have gone to had it been her choice, but she's done really well with it. We have many books in this series, The Christian Heroes Then and Now. So she finished Ida Scudder, and she went through this book fairly slowly, but she read it, she enjoyed it, she kept telling me about Ida and her adventures, and as she was a missionary doctor to India. And so it was really nice to hear my daughter's thoughts, and I really felt like she was inspired by this book. She read King of the Wind. It was part of her language arts, and the hard part probably about this were the assignments that she had to complete while reading this. One of the things that she was supposed to learn to identify was foreshadowing and how authors use it in fiction. So that was a challenge. Actually, it was a challenge for both of us because it can be very subjective. Anyways, I'm glad she got through this book. I even remember reading this book as I think I was 12 or 13 also when I read it. But back to the biographies. Now she is also doing Mary Slessor. So Mary Slessor was a missionary inspired by David Livingstone's mission work in Africa, and she was one of those kind of iconic people who said, I'm not going anywhere, no way. And of course she did. Okay, so on with what I've been reading this month, which actually I have read a lot this month. I even surprised myself. I think I was just so discouraged from February and March, and slogging my way through that Mozart's, what was it called? Mozart's Sonata? Or, I can't even remember. Sadly, that is the impression that book left on me. Anyway, I finished Speaking Truth in Love by David Powlison, and this was such a good all-round book. I would recommend this book to anybody, not just a person who is interested in biblical counseling, but anybody who just wants to grow in the area of verbal communication, having conversations with people and being encouraging and discerning, and when you find yourself in discipling kind of situations and people asking questions in very casual scenarios, like when you have them over for tea or whatever, it's just a really great guide for listening and inspiring Christians to dig into the Word about what God has to say about how we should be in our relationships with our fellow Christian and those who are thriving in their relationship with the Lord, and even those who are struggling. As for my list of non-fiction books, after doing the Mozart Sonata, I'll call it that because I can't even remember what it was called, I read The Thief. This one I hesitated actually to pick up because this author also wrote a book called The King of Atolia, and I quit that book because I found it so hard and way too political, and the storyline, I think I also just read it too slow. So by the time I got to a part, I'd already kind of forgot the previous parts in the book that I should have been focusing on. So anyways, I was hesitant to pick this book up, but I wanted to anyway because I know that it's coming up in one of the later levels of Sunlight. So I wanted to kind of see what it was about first. So this one actually I got through quite easily. Like, I really made myself because I wanted to get a good handle on the storyline, and it was a really good book. So Megan Whalen Turner, the author, was redeemed by me reading that book, in my opinion. And then I read Jennifer L. Holm, A Penny from Heaven. Now this is also part of, I think, Core W, or one of the higher ones. It might even be part of F. But A Penny from Heaven. Now this book, I am so glad that I read it. I was a little bit shocked in some parts of it. I'm hoping that my fourth grader kind of missed some of the things in this book, because she was like, when she saw me reading this, she says, "Oh, Mommy, that book, you're gonna love that book." I loved it. And as I'm reading certain parts in it, I mean, nothing is overtly shocking, but there is just some material in this book that's kind of like heavy. It was a good reminder for me. Try and preview more books. The War That Saved My Life. This is another one that I am so glad that I previewed before giving it to any of my daughters, even though the age, the recommended age on the back says 9 and up. Honestly, for my family, I don't think I'd let anybody read it under the ages of 14. This book touched me. I don't know if it's just the time period, World War II, but the relationship that this poor girl has with her real mom. She is a disabled girl in the early days of World War II in a very abusive home with a single parent, and is able to escape that with her little brother. But I mean, it is pretty descriptive, and the topics are pretty serious, and few books do I actually cry in, and this one I did. So I'm glad I read it. It's a fantastic story. The writing is amazing. So after that, very heavy read. I was in the mood for something totally different, really light. So I went to Lori Wick Cassidy. It is after going from this, and this, and this, middle grade, keep in mind, this, it's been like watching a really cheesy Hallmark movie. Anyway, I do want to finish it just because it's nice, like, to fall asleep while I'm reading right before bed. But that is what we've been into for the month of April. Thanks for watching.